She had always believed that hard work and honesty could build a strong life. From the very beginning, she had fought against many struggles, financial troubles, family problems, and people who never believed in her. But she never allowed herself to break down. She kept moving forward, step by step, trying to prove that she was capable of making something meaningful out of her life. When she finally started gaining respect in her field, she thought her struggles were behind her. But life doesn't work that way. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place, a storm appeared in the form of a powerful enemy. This person was clever, manipulative, and determined to bring her down at any cost. At first, she ignored the threats and cruel words, but slowly she realized that her enemy was not going to stop. They spread rumors, twisted her image, and created barriers for every opportunity she wanted to grab. Her life became like a battlefield. Every day felt like a fight to protect her dignity and career. People around her started questioning her, whispering behind her back, and doubting her intentions. She felt cornered, helpless, and betrayed. But deep inside, she knew she couldn't give up. If she allowed this enemy to win, all the years of hard work, all the sacrifices she had made, would vanish in a moment. She needed a plan, not just an ordinary plan, but something so powerful that it would silence her enemy once and for all. And that's when a wild idea came to her mind. It wasn't just bold, it was almost unbelievable. She decided to create a fake marriage. To the world, marriage was a symbol of stability, trust, and success. If she appeared to be happily married to a strong and respected man, no one would dare to attack her so easily. More importantly, her enemy would lose the power to control her life. At first, she laughed at the thought. A fake marriage? Who even thinks of something like that in real life? But the more she considered it, the more it began to make sense. This could be her shield. This could be her way to defeat the one person who was determined to ruin her. Of course, this wasn't something she could pull off alone. She needed someone who could play the role perfectly, someone convincing, respectable, and influential enough to make the world believe the story. That's when her eyes turned to him, the man everyone called a CEO. He had a reputation for being sharp, confident, and untouchable. He carried himself with authority, and people naturally respected him. To outsiders, he was the kind of man who could protect anyone standing next to him. She thought, if I could convince him to join this plan, everything would change. It wasn't easy approaching him. Her hands trembled when she first tried to speak to him about it. How do you even bring up something like this? But surprisingly, he didn't laugh at her. Instead, he listened quietly, his eyes sharp and calculating, as if he was already analyzing the risks and rewards. After a long pause, he gave a small smile. "If this is what you want, then I will help you," he said in a calm voice. She almost couldn't believe it. She had expected rejection, maybe even mockery. But instead, he agreed. And so, the plan began. The next few weeks were like stepping into a movie. They staged their relationship carefully. They appeared together at events, shared polite smiles in front of others, and even posted pictures that looked natural enough to fool anyone scrolling online. Everyone around them believed the story. The strong woman who finally found her perfect match, and the CEO who stood by her side with pride. Slowly, she noticed a change. The whispers began to fade. The cruel words lost their power. Even her enemy, who once laughed at her, now seemed shaken. The fake marriage had done its magic. But inside, things were not as simple. Every time she looked at him, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back. He played his role, so well, almost too well. His confidence, his silence, his mysterious way of speaking, all of it made her wonder who he really was. She told herself it didn't matter. This was just an arrangement. They were partners in a game, nothing more. She didn't need to know everything about him. Yet, late at night, when she was alone, doubts crept into her mind. She asked herself questions she couldn't answer. Why did he agree so easily? What did he want out of this? What was he hiding behind those unreadable eyes? Still, she forced herself to stay focused. This was not about feelings or curiosity. This was about survival. And right now, Her survival depended on the success of this fake marriage. She thought she had everything under control. She thought the hardest part was behind her. What she didn't know was that the real story was only just beginning. The truth she was about to discover would not only shake her plan, but also shatter her heart in ways she never imagined. From the outside, their new life together looked perfect. People saw them as a strong couple, the kind that inspired envy and admiration. Wherever they went, eyes followed them, and whispers turned into praises. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was safe. The fake marriage had built an invisible wall around her, keeping her enemy away and silencing the gossip that once haunted her every step. But behind the smiles, the truth was very different. What they shared wasn't love. It wasn't even friendship. It was an agreement, carefully designed and neatly packaged to fool the world. They played their roles well. In front of others, he would place his hand gently on hers, and she would lean toward him as if they were truly connected. At events, they would laugh together at jokes that weren't even funny. And when cameras flashed, they always made sure to look like two people who belonged to each other. At first, she found it awkward. Every gesture felt staged, every smile felt forced. But as days turned into weeks, she began to notice something. He was a master at pretending. The way he carried himself, the way he looked at her in front of others, it was flawless. Sometimes even she forgot that it wasn't real. The more they appeared together, the more people believed in their story. Friends congratulated her, strangers admired her, and even her enemy seemed shaken by her sudden rise. It felt like she had finally turned the tables. For once, she wasn't the one being attacked. She was the one holding the power. But while the world celebrated their union, her private life grew complicated. Living this lie wasn't easy. Every morning, she had to remind herself of the role she was playing. Every evening, she had to put on the mask again, making sure no one saw through the act. There were moments when she wished she could drop the performance and just breathe. But she knew one wrong step could ruin everything. Still, what bothered her the most wasn't the pressure from outside. It was him, the man she was tied to. He was calm, collected, and unreadable. He didn't speak much about his life, and when she asked, he would brush off the questions with a smile. He never lost his composure, no matter the situation. It was as if he lived inside a carefully built wall, a wall she could never climb. Sometimes, when they were alone, the silence between them felt heavy. She would sit across the room, watching him as he worked on his laptop or took calls she could never fully hear. He never offered explanations, and she didn't push. After all, it wasn't part of the deal. But deep down, her curiosity grew stronger every day. One night, while they were leaving a public event, she noticed how people treated him. They didn't just respect him. They seemed almost afraid of him. The way they greeted him, the way they stepped aside when he walked past, made her realize something she hadn't considered before. Who exactly was this man she had tied her life to? Her thoughts kept circling back to that question. She told herself it didn't matter, that this was only temporary, but her heart refused to stay calm. She wanted to know more, to understand why he agreed to help her so easily, to uncover the truth hidden behind those sharp eyes. The more she tried to ignore it, the more restless she became. Her days were filled with staged smiles and perfect pictures, but her nights were filled with doubts. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into something much bigger than she imagined. And then came the small details, things she couldn't ignore. Once, she noticed he carried two phones, switching between them, as if one was for the world to see, and the other was a secret. Another time, she overheard him on a late-night call, speaking in a tone she had never heard before, serious, firm, almost threatening. When she walked into the room, he quickly ended the call, smiling as if nothing had happened. Each incident added to her unease. But she kept telling herself the same thing. This is just an arrangement. Don't get involved. Don't ask questions. Yet, despite her efforts, her heart was not as disciplined as her mind. Against her will, she found herself noticing the small details about him. The way he straightened his tie before stepping into a meeting. The way his expression softened when he thought no one was watching. The quiet strength in his silence. It confused her. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had created this fake marriage to protect herself, not to feel drawn toward him. She tried to push the thoughts away, reminding herself that this was all an act. But the more time she spent with him, the harder it became to separate the act from reality. And just when she thought she had control over her emotions, something unexpected happened. During one public event, surrounded by flashing cameras and curious eyes, he reached for her hand. It was supposed to be another staged gesture like all the others. But this time, his touch felt different. Firm, steady, almost protective. For a brief moment, she forgot they were pretending. For a brief moment, she felt safe. That night, as she lay awake, she realized the danger wasn't just outside, it was inside her heart. She was beginning to care about someone she barely knew. Someone who still felt like a mystery. Someone who might be hiding secrets too dangerous for her to uncover. But the story was already moving forward, faster than she expected. She thought she had created this fake marriage to outsmart her enemy. What she didn't know was that this plan was slowly leading her into a truth that would change her life forever. The plan seemed to be working better than she had ever imagined. With each passing day, her enemy grew quieter, almost as if they were losing confidence. The fake marriage had become a shield, one that made her untouchable in the eyes of the world. Where once she had been the target of whispers and rumors, now people spoke of her with admiration. They said she was lucky to have found such a powerful partner, that her life was finally complete. Outwardly, it looked like a victory. She carried herself with confidence, smiled more in public, and even allowed herself to enjoy the admiration she received. But beneath that surface of success, a new kind of tension was growing, one she could neither ignore nor control. The first cracks appeared in small, almost invisible ways. At business events, her so-called husband would sometimes disappear without explanation, only to return hours later with no proper reason for where he had been. When she asked casually, he would give vague answers, his voice calm, his face unreadable. She wanted to press further, but something about his tone warned her not to. Then there were the calls. Late at night, long after the lights in their home had dimmed, she would hear his voice in the next room. Sometimes his words were sharp, almost cold, as if he were giving orders. Other times he spoke in a language she didn't fully recognize, one that carried weight and authority. And each time she stepped closer, the call would end, and he would greet her with a smile that looked practiced. The unease inside her grew stronger. She told herself it wasn't her place to question him. After all, this wasn't a real marriage. They were partners in a deal, not in life. But no matter how much she reminded herself of that truth, her heart wouldn't let go of the questions. Who was he really? Why did he agree so quickly to this fake marriage? And what exactly was he hiding? Her days became a strange mix of triumph and doubt. On one hand, her enemy had begun to back away, clearly unsettled by her new position of strength. But on the other hand, the man who stood by her side, the one the world saw as her savior, was becoming her greatest mystery. The turning point came during a charity event. They attended together, dressed perfectly for the cameras. He spoke with donors and leaders, shaking hands and commanding the room with his presence. She watched from aside, feeling almost proud of how effortlessly he played his role. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a man approach him. Their conversation was quiet, urgent, and unlike the usual polite exchanges. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the tension in her partner's jaw, the sudden seriousness in his eyes. When she asked him later about it, he dismissed it as just business. But she knew better. She had spent enough of her life reading people to recognize when someone was lying. His answer wasn't just vague, it was deliberate. He was keeping something from her. The doubts began to consume her. She started noticing things she once ignored. How he always seemed to know more about her enemy than she told him. How he avoided speaking about his past. How people treated him with a kind of respect that went beyond admiration. It was fear, subtle but unmistakable. And then, one evening, she stumbled upon something she couldn't ignore. While looking for a file in his study, her eyes caught a glimpse of a small locked box tucked away in the corner of a drawer. It wasn't the box itself that caught her attention, it was the way it was hidden, almost as if he didn't want anyone to find it. She hesitated, her hand trembling above it, before pulling away. This wasn't part of their agreement. She had no right to invade his privacy. But the image of that locked box stayed in her mind, haunting her. It became a symbol of everything she didn't know about him, every secret, every hidden truth that might one day surface. Despite her doubts, life continued. Their public appearances grew more convincing. They smiled for cameras, shared dinners with influential people, and even played the part of a loving couple in front of close acquaintances. To the world, they were perfect. But behind the scenes, she felt like she was living on borrowed time, waiting for the moment when the truth would finally reveal itself. Her emotions grew more complicated. She told herself it was just business, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. His presence gave her a sense of safety, even when she didn't understand him. And that was the most dangerous part. She was beginning to trust someone she barely knew, someone who might be hiding a past capable of destroying her. Every night, as she lay awake, her thoughts circled back to the same fear. Had she really outsmarted her enemy, or had she walked blindly into a trap she couldn't see yet? She didn't know it then, but the answers she was searching for were closer than she imagined. And when the truth finally came, it would not only shatter her carefully built plan, but also change the course of her life forever. For weeks, she had lived with the unease, pretending everything was fine. The world saw her smiling beside him, admired their so-called love story, and envied the perfect life they seemed to share. But inside, she carried a storm of doubts. Every unexplained absence, every late-night call, every vague answer, it all built up like shadows on the walls of her mind. She told herself to stay patient, to focus on the bigger picture. After all, the plan was working. Her enemy had grown quiet, the attacks had slowed, and for the first time in months, she could breathe. But peace never lasts forever. And her heart knew the truth. The biggest threat might not come from her enemy at all, but from the man standing right beside her. It happened one ordinary evening. The kind of evening where everything seemed calm on the surface. He had left his study door slightly open, something he rarely did. Normally, that room was like a fortress, always locked, always private. But that night, as she walked past, curiosity pulled her in. Inside, the room looked the same as always, shelves lined with books, neat piles of documents, and his laptop sitting silently on the desk. But then she noticed the drawer, the same one she had seen weeks ago, the one that held the small lockbox. Her heart raced. She told herself to walk away, to respect his privacy. But another voice inside her whispered louder. What if the answers you need are in there? What if the truth is waiting behind that lock? Her hands trembled as she pulled the drawer open. The box was still there, tucked neatly in its corner. She lifted it out, feeling its weight, heavy with secrets. For a long moment, she just stared at it, torn between fear and desperation. Finally, she tried the simplest thing, the desk key. And to her surprise, it worked. The lock clicked open. Inside, she found a set of documents, old, worn, but carefully preserved. As she pulled them out, her eyes widened. They weren't just ordinary papers. They were proof of a different identity. His name wasn't the one he had given her. His background wasn't the one he had allowed the world to see. Everything he had told her was a mask. She sank into the chair, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. Each one revealed another layer of lies. He wasn't the man he claimed to be, not in business, not in life, not in anything. His past was tied to people she recognized, people connected to her very enemy. A wave of panic washed over her. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She had built her defense, her entire strategy, on this man. And now, the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. If this truth ever came out, it wouldn't just ruin the plan. It would destroy her completely. She sat there in silence, staring at the documents, her mind spinning. Why had he agreed to help her so easily? What was his real reason? Was he working against her all along? The sound of footsteps pulled her back to the moment. He was coming. Her heart leapt to her throat. In a rush, she shoved the papers back into the box, locked it, and slid it into the drawer just as the door opened. He stepped inside, his expression calm as always. But for the first time, she wondered, was that calmness real or just another mask? "Still awake?" he asked softly, his eyes scanning her face. She forced a smile, trying to steady her voice. "Yes, couldn't sleep." He nodded, moving toward the desk. For a moment, her whole body froze, fearing he would notice the drawer had been touched. But instead, he simply grabbed a file from the shelf and turned back toward the door. "Don't stay up too late," he said with a faint smile before leaving the room. The moment the door closed, her heart pounded in her chest. She had seen enough to know the truth. The man she trusted to protect her was living under a false identity. And worse, his ties to her enemy were undeniable. That night, she didn't sleep at all. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with questions that wouldn't stop. Was he her ally? Or was he the greatest threat she had ever faced? Had she brought danger into her own home, thinking it was protection? For the first time since the fake marriage began, she felt trapped. She had created this arrangement to escape her enemy, but now she realized she might have unknowingly tied herself to someone even more dangerous. Her world was no longer black and white. It wasn't just about revenge or survival or protecting her dignity. It was about uncovering the truth before it destroyed her. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The secret she had stumbled upon was bigger than she could imagine. And once it unraveled, it would change everything. The days after her discovery felt unreal. She continued the act, smiling in public, holding his hand when cameras flashed, and laughing at conversations she barely heard. To everyone else, nothing had changed. But inside her, everything was different. Each time she looked at him, she no longer saw her protector. She saw a stranger hiding behind a mask, a man whose secrets were tied to the very enemy she had tried so hard to escape. She told herself to stay calm, to gather her thoughts before taking any step. But her heart refused to settle. Every sound in the house, every late-night call, every closed-door conversation, it all felt suspicious now. She lived with a constant fear, as though danger was sitting in the room with her, watching silently. The worst part was the way he carried on as if nothing was wrong. His calm smile, his gentle words, his steady presence. It all looked so genuine that, if she hadn't seen the documents, she might still have believed him. And that realization shook her even more. How could someone lie so perfectly? How could someone build an entire life on a false identity and never let it show? Her enemy, the one she thought she had defeated with this fake marriage, somehow learned the truth as well. She wasn't sure how, but whispers started to return. People began asking quiet questions, their eyes filled with doubt. It was as if the world was beginning to sense the cracks in her carefully built facade. Then came the night that changed everything. She was at a gathering, surrounded by familiar faces, when her enemy approached her. They leaned in close, their voice low but sharp, cutting into her like a blade. "It's funny," they whispered, "how quickly you can trust someone you don't even know. I wonder what you'll do when the world finds out who your husband really is." Her chest tightened, her smile freezing in place. She didn't respond, she couldn't. The words burned in her ears, confirming what she already feared. Her enemy knew the truth. And if they knew, it was only a matter of time before everyone else did too. That night, she confronted him. She couldn't hold it inside anymore. "Who are you really?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm. He looked at her quietly, his eyes unreadable, as though he had been waiting for this moment. Instead of denying, he simply sighed, his expression heavy with something she couldn't quite name. "You shouldn't have looked," he said softly. Her heart dropped. His words confirmed everything. There was no attempt to cover it, no desperate lie to calm her fears. He knew she had discovered his secret, and in that moment, she realized the marriage was no longer a shield, it was a trap. The betrayal cut deeper than she expected. This wasn't just about lies. This was about trust, about survival, about her very life. She had placed her future in his hands, believing he was her ally. But all along, he had been carrying a truth that could destroy her. In the days that followed, her enemy wasted no time. Rumors began to spread again, sharper and more dangerous than before. People whispered about her marriage, questioning its authenticity. Some even suggested she had been deceived, that she was nothing more than a pawn in a larger game. Her world started to collapse. The respect she had regained began to slip away. Doors that had opened for her slowly closed again. And through it all, he remained silent, watching with that same calm expression. At night, she would stare at him across the room, her chest heavy with anger and confusion. Why had he agreed to this? What did he gain from tying himself to her? And worst of all, had he been working with her enemy from the very beginning? She wanted answers, but she was also afraid of them. Sometimes, the truth is far more dangerous than the lies we tell ourselves. The betrayal wasn't just about him lying. It was about her realizing she had lost control. The plan she had built with such care, the marriage she thought would save her, it had all turned against her. Instead of protecting her, it had left her vulnerable, exposed, and at the mercy of two powerful forces she couldn't control, her enemy and the man she once thought was her savior. Everywhere she turned, there was danger. Every word spoken in public felt like it carried hidden meaning. Every look from strangers seemed to hold judgment. She had never felt so isolated, so betrayed, so completely alone. And yet, in the quiet moments, a small part of her still longed to believe him. A part of her whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was more to the story. Maybe his secrets weren't meant to harm her. Maybe there was another reason behind it all. But even if that was true, it didn't erase the pain. It didn't erase the fact that her life had been shattered by a truth she never asked to uncover. Her fake marriage had begun as a clever plan to outsmart her enemy. But now it had become the very weapon that was destroying her. And deep down, she knew the final blow was yet to come. Her life had become a house built on sand. Every day that passed, she felt the ground slipping beneath her feet. The whispers were louder now, the stares sharper, and the trust she had once earned was vanishing. The marriage that had once been her shield had now turned into a weapon pointed directly at her heart. She could no longer look at him without feeling a storm of emotions: anger, fear, confusion, and, against her will, a trace of longing. He was still the man who had stood by her in public, still the one whose presence silenced her enemies. But he was also the man who had hidden the truth, the man whose secrets had left her life hanging by a thread. The final blow came faster than she expected. Her enemy, who had been watching closely, chose the perfect moment to strike. A series of documents exposing parts of his hidden past suddenly surfaced in public. They spread like wildfire, whispered first in private circles, then splashed across headlines. His real identity was no longer a secret between the two of them. Now the world knew, and with that revelation, her life shattered. People who once admired her began to distance themselves. Friends avoided her calls, partners canceled deals, and every glance in public carried judgment. They didn't care that she hadn't known the truth. They didn't care that she had been deceived too. To them, she was guilty by association. She tried to fight back, to explain, but the more she spoke, the less people listened. Her voice, once strong and respected, now sounded desperate and weak in the ears of others. At home, the silence between them grew unbearable. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tear down the walls he had built around himself. But each time she opened her mouth, the words died on her tongue. What good were answers now, when the damage had already been done? One night, she finally broke the silence. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with the weight of her pain. She made the decision quietly, without dramatic words or heated fights. One morning, she simply packed her things and walked away. No explanations, no promises, no goodbyes. She didn't need to hear more lies, and she didn't have the strength to search for truths anymore. As she closed the door behind her, a wave of emptiness washed over her. She had started this journey to protect herself, to win against her enemy, to take back the power that had been stolen from her. Instead, she had lost more than she ever imagined. She walked forward with nothing but the lessons carved into her heart. She had learned that deception, no matter how carefully planned, always carries a price. She had learned that trust, once broken, leaves scars that never truly heal. And she had learned that sometimes the people we invite into our lives to protect us can become the very ones who break us apart. Her enemy had won, but not in the way they expected. They hadn't destroyed her with rumors or lies. She had destroyed herself by stepping into a fake life, believing it could protect her from the truth. The CEO's secret had not just ruined the marriage. It had ruined her faith in people and plans in herself. She had built her life on strength and determination, but now, as she walked into the unknown, she carried only the fragments of what once was. The world would move on, her story would fade from the whispers, but the memory of it would live inside her forever. A fake marriage, a hidden truth, and a shattered ending. That was the legacy of the plan she thought would save her.